Hey everyone, it's Mike here, and in this video I'm going to walk you through the process of making a comic style artwork. So without further ado, let's jump right in. In the first stage of the process is the sketching or penciling stage. A penciler is someone who lays out the foundation of the drawing by initially sketching out the characters and the scenes, and then refining it later on for the inker to ink over. So since I'm doing a comic style portrait for this video, I'm going to start by loosely sketching out the character's head. Let's start off by using the brush tool and choosing a pencil or graphite brush, and then I'll start by sketching a circle. Then I'm going to draw a line down to where I want the chin to be located. So basically just imagine drawing the shape of a skull. Um, After that, I'm going to create a line in the middle between the top of the head and bottom of the chin. And this is where the eyes will be located. After that, I'll add in a hairline, followed by refining the shape of the head. Now let's make some eyebrows, followed by creating the shape of the ear, which is around the size between the eyebrows and the bottom of the nose, which I will add in later. Then I'll create the side of the neck and rest of the body to fill in the page. So let's reposition the sketch in the center, and then I'm going to add in the trapezius muscle, which is the area between the neck and the shoulder, followed by the clavicle or collarbone. Then indicate the pectoral muscle area, and now the page is filled. Alright, let's move on, and I'll do a quick lesson on the facial proportions. So half the distance between the top of the head and bottom of the chin lies the eyes. Half the distance between the eyes and the bottom of the chin are where the nostrils are located. And then the location of the mouth is located slightly above half the distance between the nostrils and the bottom of the chin. So let's zoom in and start plugging in the facial features. Let's start by drawing the outline of an eye, and then I'll add in the iris. And now we have our eye. Next, let's draw the other eye, and the distance between one eye to the other one is pretty much an eye length apart. So let's draw out the other eye and add in the iris. Next, let's define the nose by adding the nostril and the tip of the nose, followed by drawing out the mouth. And when you're drawing the mouth starts and ends. Typically, they align vertically with the pupil of the eyes, and only if the character is looking completely straight at eye level. But since this is a 3/4 view portrait, sometimes the eyes will move towards the viewer, which means it will be slightly shorter. And as you can see, the side of the mouth aligns with the sclera, or the white areas of the eye. And that's how I usually determine the length of the character's mouth. But with comics, you can exaggerate to make it bigger or smaller. It changes in size depending on the emotion as well. Moving on, let's go ahead and define the cheek and cheekbone areas. And now let's add the bottom lip to this character. After that, let's start sketching out the base of his hair. And I'll start from the hairline, and then I'll create an outline shape around the head. Then I'll start adding in the collar of his shirt, and after that I'm going to do the collar on the other side. Alright, so let's go back up and we're going to define his jawline, and I'm going to give him that iconic superhero chin cleft, followed by a cast shadow underneath of it. Okay, so let's go back on defining the hair a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to flip the artboard horizontally to see if my proportions look and feel accurate. Then I'm going to make some minor adjustments. So it doesn't look too bad, but it looks like I need to define the back of the neck area a bit. After that, I'm going to flip it back again, and this time let's add in the glasses. And then I'm going to refine the ear. Now let's move on to the shirt, and I'm going to use the eraser tool to clean up some unwanted lines. And that way, when I move on to the inking stage, I won't mistakenly ink areas filled with pencil. But then again, we do have the undo button and eraser tools to make our lives easier. So anyways, for now, let's move on and draw the character's necktie. I want to have his tie loosen up so it looks like he's getting ready to change into his alter ego. And then I'm going to add some folds, and then I'm going to zoom back out and just to make sure everything looks fine. Then let's add some shade under the hair and make parts of it have this shimmering highlight. But first I'm going to select a light blue color to demonstrate. All right, but before I get into that, I'm going to mark the areas with an X, which indicates where I want to fill fill it with black ink. So this method is called spotting blacks. It really helps streamline the sketching or penciling stage, because if you know that the area is going to be filled with ink, it's going to be a huge time saver from shading everything in pencil. Okay, now let's switch back to the light blue color, and basically I'm going to create something called a streamer path. Think of it as like a water stream, and that's where I want to place the highlights of my hair, of my character's hair, I mean. Now let's change the color back to black and add in the pencils. So when we're adding in the pencils, we want to create marks that flow with the hair. That way it'll indicate to the inker the direction it's going. Alright, I'm going to mark some areas X as well. And since I'm working on a graphics tablet, it feels more natural for me to flip the artboard and make a contour line on the opposite side. Okay, now that we have the hair done, I'm going to lower the opacity of the sketch layer, and I'm going to create another layer, but it looks like I got to organize myself a bit and rename the sketch layer to something like rough sketch. And then the new layer will be called ink. Now I'm ready to start inking. Okay, right now I am simply going over my pencil sketch using an ink brush. But first I want to talk about why inking is an important stage of the process. Simply because, well, it wouldn't be a comic style artwork if there was no ink involved. I mean, nowadays comics can be created without the inking stage, but if you want to have that look and feel of traditional comic art style, then the inking stage would be an essential part of your process. Another reason why I think it's important because it adds character through a variety of thin and thick lines, and even some brushes has texture to them, so it makes it feel a lot more organic. So for example, if the line weight was completely constant throughout the drawing, it'll look too flat and technical, something out of a IKEA furniture manual or something. But to me, the inking process adds a human touch to it. Alright, let's get back to the inking. And as you can see on this part, since I'm drawing with a graphics tablet, I'm having some difficulties getting the stroke that I want. So instead of drawing the line over and over again, if you go up to the toolbar, there is a stabilizer checkbox. So I'm going to click on that, and by default, it's set to rope mode. You can also adjust the length of the rope as well. But the rope mode is basically once you start dragging the brush, it feels like there's a rope attached to it. And as I'm demonstrating right now, you can see that there's this magenta color line that appears once you start dragging the brush. And it's really helpful because it gives you a preview of where your brush will be inked before you fully commit to it. This is a great way to create smooth and accurate lines that you want, just like that. Alright, I'm going to continue inking, and I'm going to speed this part of the video up, and I'll check back with you shortly. Alright, as you probably saw during the time lapse, I turned on the stabilizer on and off every now and then. And I also flipped the artboard horizontally because it feels much more natural and comfortable for me to ink over certain lines due to their angles. For example, in the hair area, I'm used to inking the contour lines because it makes me push my brush from the bottom right to the top left in a natural way. And yeah, it's a good way, especially when you're working in a graphics tablet and you're not working on a drawing tablet where you can actually draw on the screen. So, all right, let's move on. Now I'm going to continue inking the hair and I'll check back with you shortly. Okay, now let's add some hatching on the cast shadow underneath the chin to help the colorist determine where the light source is coming from. After that, I'm going to add in the pupils to the character's eyes. Alright, I'm going to zoom back out, and now the inking stage is complete. Alright, let's create a new layer and call this flats. Flats are essentially selections of shapes filled with solid colors. A flatter's responsibility is to make the colorist workflow efficient and streamlined by creating these solid shapes of colors so that it's easier for the colorist to select and isolate, which I will demonstrate in the coloring stage later in this video. So the colors that are used in flats are easy to identify for the colorist. They're also distinguishable from one area or object from another. So let's head over to our color palette, and I'll just select the default system color palette for now. And I'm going to turn off the sketch layer real quick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first select the rectangle marquee and select the entire artboard, and then fill it with a solid background color. Then I'm going to select the flats layer and set the blending mode to multiply. That way the ink layer will be visible. Next, I'm going to use the pen tool, and I'm going to switch from my graphics tablet stylus to my mouse to draw out the shapes. So I'll start by creating these shapes. Well, I'll start by creating the shape of the shirt first, by creating the anchor points. You want these anchor points inside of the line art like so. So when I hit a curve area like this, I would click and drag the anchor point handles until I get the right curve that I want. Then I'm going to click on the last anchor point to reset the handles. Alright, now that you know how to use the pen tool, I'm going to speed up this process and I'll check back with you shortly. So now that I've created the shape of the shirt, let's turn this shape into a selection by going up to our toolbar and then click selection. Then I'm going to fill it with a solid color that's different than the background color. Now let's continue to create flats for the other parts, like the tie the face, and the hair. Okay, in this part, I'm going to intentionally create anchor points over the flats of the shirt, and I'll show you why in a few seconds. Now that we have the face and parts of the shirt selected, let's go over to the magic wand tool, and then I'm going to subtract or deselect the flats of the shirt, and now we just have the face selected. Now I can fill it in with another flat color, and after that, let's wrap up the flatting stage by creating a flat for the hair. And now we can finally move on to the last stage, which is coloring. Alright, now we are on the last stage of the process. The role of a colorist is simply adding color to the line art. The colorist sets the tone and the mood of the artwork, and it makes the readers feel a certain way. For example, you wouldn't see bright, saturated colors in something like a funeral scene. A colorist has good knowledge of lighting, shadows, and also color theory. They're able to bring depth to the art and elicit different emotions from the readers. Alright, let's go ahead and start coloring. Let's create a new layer and select the face. Then I'm going to change my color palette real quick, followed by going to selecting a base color. Now let's toggle the flats visibility off, and I'm going to fill it in with the new base color. Then I'm going to change the blending mode to multiply, and just for good practice, let's rename our layer as well. Now I'm going to repeat this process of creating a new layer for each flat color and then filling it in with the base color. And then I'm going to set the new layer to multiply blending mode as well. So I'm going to speed this portion of the video up, and I'll check back with you shortly. Alright, now that we have the base colors in separate layers, let's add in the shadows and the highlights. I'm going to change my brush and set it to a gouache style. You may use any mediums that you prefer, but in this video I'm using one of my favorite gouache brush sets for coloring. Now let's start with the skin and face layer. And what I'm going to do is use the color selector and select a darker shade for the shadow of the skin. And I want to add a little bit of a warmer tone since I want to add some cool tones, cool lightings later. So let's close out the color picker window and let's try out the brushes. By the way, there is one feature that I like using that prevents me from coloring outside of the skin base color, like so. And let me undo this real quick. And that feature is called Protect Alpha, which can be found hidden in the top right corner of the toolbar. Basically, turning on the Protect Alpha allows you to paint over the opaque colors in the layer. And as you can see, I'm unable to paint outside of the lines even if I tried. Another way is to select the entire base color, or create a selection of it and then paint over it. Just remember, if you're using the Protect Alpha feature, just remember to turn it off if you're going to add more of the base color in other areas in the same layer. Alright, after that I'm going to create a new blank color palette, which I've already done. Then I'm going to add in the colors that I've selected as my base, shadow, and highlights. Just testing out this highlight color real quick. Alright, now I'm going to add in the blocks of shadow and ensure that the brush opacity is set to 100%. Then, as I mentioned earlier in the inking stage, there is a hint of where the light is coming from underneath the chin, which means the light source is coming from the top and to the right. Then I'm going to add in some cast shadows into the face and neck areas. So I'm going to speed this part up and I'll check back with you shortly. Okay, now I'm going to add in the highlights to the facial areas, but this time I'm going to use a lower opacity, something like 30%, because it helps me create a softer highlight. And if I wanted to have a full opacity of it, I can just layer it over. Alright, let's add in the eyes and the eyeglasses. So I'm simply using the eyedropper tool to select the blue from the hair, and I'm going to use it for the iris and the frame of the glasses. Alright, now I'm going to repeat the same process of selecting the shadow and highlight colors of my base color layers, and I'm going to start painting them in. Alright, I'm going to speed up the rest of this video and I'll check back with you shortly. Okay, now that we have finished adding all the colors, shadows, and highlights, you can experiment and play around with the contrast levels, change the temperature of the colors to enhance the mood, add colors to your line art, add a textured background, and all these other tools and features to bring your comic art to life. And if you're interested, I can cover those topics in future videos. So that wraps up our video for today, but before you go, leave a comment below and let me know which stage of the process did you enjoy the most and why. So thanks for watching. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more video tutorials like these in the near future. And with that being said, I'll see you next time.